Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of explorations of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is Missile Command for the Atari 5200. This was a 1982 release from Atari and a direct port of the Atari 8-bit version from 1981. This port was then subsequently used as the built-in game for the 1987 Atari XEGS computer console hybrid. If no cartridge was in the slot and the keyboard was not connected, Missile Command would boot instead of the Atari 8-bit OS's self-test menu. So this version of Missile Command certainly got around a bit, and this is actually the version of Missile Command that I grew up with. So it's not identical to the arcade version because it doesn't have the 3 missile bases, but in terms of presentation and gameplay, it's actually a very good port as well. And certainly the Atari 8-bit version supported a trackball. I don't know if the 5200 version did. There was a trackball available for 5200, so it stands to reason that this version should as well, because it's based on the Atari 8-bit version. But anyway, all that aside, let's go play Missile Command for Atari 5200.
Okay, here we are once again with Atari Flashback Classics. And today it's time for the Atari 5200 version of Missile Command, which is the same as the Atari 8-bit version and the version built into the XE game system. Consequently, this is the version of Missile Command that I grew up with, which is nice. Let's have a look at the manual. Here is the manual for the 5200 version. Operation Defense. So, this is a similar story to the one in the 2600 version, but it's a slightly different setup. So let's have a little bit of story time to begin with. In 2203, the planet Zardon was established as Earth's outermost colony. Originally, Zardon was intended to be the front line of defense in the event of an interplanetary attack. A missile base stocked with anti-ballistic missiles, or ABMs, was the first order of business. After its completion, the founding colonists set about building a town. In the years that ensued, the town flourished and grew into a city. Eventually, 5 other cities evolved to keep up with the burgeoning population. Today, Zardon far supersedes its initial function as frontline defender. Back on Earth, it is known as the Resource Planet, because precious ores and minerals are mined from Zardon's rich deposits. Zardonians go about their business with a sense of pride and well-being. They have actually built a utopia for themselves. But now this very utopia is threatened by chaos and destruction, for all is not peace and harmony in the celestial spheres. Unlike Zardon, the planet Critolia is undergoing a terrible upheaval. Poverty, crime and civil unrest plague it like a contagious disease. Although Zardon has continuously given the less fortunate Critolians interplanetary aid, the latter have merely exhibited token appreciation. Secretly, they resent Zardon and covet its rich resources. Critolia has turned many of the Zardonian supplies into warheads, missiles, satellites and bombs. For several months, the Critolians have bided their time, scheming and plotting to attack Zardon to make the resource planet their own. At this very moment, the surprise attack is on its way. At Zardon Missile Base, the hotline flashes wildly. "Commander, our radar just picked up a barrage of missiles headed straight towards us." "What? But that's incredible. Who?" You cut your question short, realizing this is no time to ask. Rather, it is time to act. You command Zardon Missile Base. You are responsible for the defense of your home planet. You must employ quick thinking and strategy to successfully pit Zardon's ABMs against the invaders' fierce onrush of weapons. Otherwise, the Zardonian civilization will perish. Now, as I've mentioned previously, there is a wonderful record based on that story that is clearly someone listened to War of the Worlds and thought they could do their own version, and they couldn't. It is hilarious in the best possible way. So I strongly recommend seeking that out if you've not already when I've previously mentioned it. Anyway, Missile Command can be played by 1 or 2 players. In single-player games, the object is to beat your own highest score. In 2-player games, the object is to score more points than your opponents. So this is all pretty straightforward compared to what we've seen. So, using the 5200 controllers, use 1 or 2 5200 controllers with this Atari game cartridge. For your convenience, 2 keypad overlays are included with this game, so it's not really anything to worry about too much with the controls on this, because it's pretty much move and fire. So, if you wish to start Missile Command at a more difficult and higher scoring wave level, press the O key on your keypad controller or the square marked skip mode on your keypad overlay. Okay, so you can skip a certain number of waves and start further into the game if you want to. But aside from that, it doesn't have all of the ridiculous number of variations that the 2600 version does. There's also a practice mode where you can practice against just the smart missiles, which are some of the most difficult things to shoot down in the game. So if you hit the 8 key on the keypad, you can practice that and play that in its own way as well. And yeah, I was right, there is a trackball option that you can play with this game. It looks like at the time this was released, the trackball for the 5200 hadn't been released, but the game was programmed with trackball support built in, so it was ready to go. And as I say, the Atari 8-bit version certainly supported trackball as well, so there was no reason for them to remove it for the 5200 version, certainly. Anyway, let's play. Missile Command, copyright 1982. Right, so... 1 player, skip 0, bonus, that's fine. Let's just begin. In fact, as it happens, it appears to be simulating the trackball controls using those same twitchy controls that the arcade version of this on Atari Flashback Classics has. So that takes a little bit of getting used to. Does require a gentle touch. But the nice thing is you can also use the digital controls if you prefer by using the D-pad. So you actually have the option of using either style of controls. And if you watch the Atari 2600 version of this last time, you'll notice that there's a few differences. The main one being the fact that you've got these additional enemies coming in that will launch missiles if you leave them on screen for too long. Such as right there. And we've also got missiles that split after they've been flying in for a certain distance as well. And also that bonus sequence area is much closer to what we have in the arcade version. There's also, generally speaking, a lot more going on screen at any one time. So there's a lot more missiles, there can be a lot more explosions on screen. I think there can be 8 explosions on screen instead of 3 in the 2600 version. You've also got that nice readout of the bonus display when you start a new level. You know, things like the sort of little tracer thing that fires and shows where your missiles are going to land. So all in all, it's just a bit more of a polished package than the 2600 version was. That's not to say that the 2600 version is bad by any means, but it's just the additional capabilities of the 5200 meant that they could do more with this version and make it closer and more authentic to the arcade original. The 2600 version was very impressive what they managed to achieve with the 2600 hardware, and for a lot of people it's still a favourite version of Missile Command. But this one, I remember I played this version before I played the arcade version of Missile Command, and when I did eventually come to play... Oh no. Oh, we should get an extra city at the end of this stage at least. Yeah, and when I did eventually come to play the arcade version of Missile Command for the first time, I was super impressed at how well this version adapted the arcade original. But it is still tricky, and it is still filled with that horrifying sense of inevitability that is so iconic to Missile Command. Right, I was mostly using the digital controls for that. Let's have another go using the analog controls this time. You see, that's quite authentic as well. A good adaptation of the way the arcade version ended. All right, I'm going to try using exclusively the virtual trackball controls this time. So it means I need a gentle touch. But in theory, I should be able to respond to things more quickly, so long as I can, you know, not not fling my sight wildly around the screen. I think in this game it's quite easy to get hung up on thinking you need to be more accurate than you actually do. So the thing with the trackball controls, as long as you get in sort of roughly the right area of the screen, then you can still succeed, because the explosions from the missiles you fire, they stay on screen for quite a while, and they cover quite a large area as well. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That was less good. Starting to struggle a bit. It's just not quite what analog joysticks were built for, analog joypads. It's just a little bit too twitchy. But I imagine it is something you could probably get used to with a bit of practice. But I think for the most part I do prefer the digital controls. It's when you're trying to be precise with these analog controls, it just feels like you have to grip the controller really hard to get a good feel for them. Yes, we get it. I'm gonna have one more go though. I'm determined to make these controls work. Like I say, thankfully, if you don't get along with controls like this, you're not restricted to them at all. You can just use the D-pad and have an experience more akin to what it would have been like on the Atari 8-bit in particular, if you're playing with a joystick. The Atari 5200, of course, had its weird-ass, non-centering analog joystick. So I don't know, maybe the 5200 version really did feel like this. I've never used an actual 5200 controller. People mock it regularly. But I do kind of want to try it, because it's one of those controllers that I really like the idea of. But it's also, I get the distinct impression, a controller where the technology wasn't really up to the ambition of the designers. So the designers had a great idea. It just wasn't especially practical to implement it using the tech of the time. Oh god. They're everywhere. Oh, missed. What? But... A little bit of questionable collision detection going on there. Oh dear. Oh! It's all good. It's all good. We've got a bonus city. Nice. Ooh. Can't believe I successfully fended that one off. But you see, if you're familiar with the 2600 version, just being able to fire a few more missiles at once makes it a little bit easier. It makes some of those heavy barrages a little bit easier to deal with. That's because you can sort of blanket the sky with explosions and set up a bit more of a barrier. Oh dear. Oh dear. Feeble bonus. Leave me alone. We're down to pathetic bonus territory. Get out of here. No one likes you. Ah! I think we're dead. Oh no! One more chance. One more chance. I suspect we are now looking at the end, however. Yeah, that is all over. Stressful. Such a stressful game. And deliberately so. And so it should be. It's about a serious subject. But yes, a subject that people took very seriously back in the time when it was originally written. A lot of Cold War paranoia and fear of nuclear war and that sort of thing. And Missile Command was a good way to sort of relieve some of that stress, I guess. Unless you were Dave Toyer and supposedly had nightmares based on the Californian cities you originally modelled the game on. But there you go. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
Missile Command, Missile Command, Missile Command, Missile Command. Here on Zardon we are peaceful, we don't like to fight. Here on Zardon we work hard and try to do what's right. We would never be the first ones to stage an attack. But when someone shoots at us, we shoot back. Now the battle has begun, the Krytal ships are near. In just a little while, their missiles will be here. Calling all base commanders with nerves of steel. I hope that you've been practicing, 'cause this time is for real. Missile Command.